In the ancient pages of the Bible, there lies a mystery, a paradox that few dare to explore. What if I told you that the nation at the heart of today's conflicts, the one often portrayed as an enemy of Israel, was once chosen by God to liberate his people and rebuild his holy temple? Yes, Iran, an ancient land that has long been the subject of both reverence and fear. The same Persia that prophesied to play a pivotal role in the end of times, a nation both chosen and condemned. But how is this possible? How can the same nation that freed Israel from Babylon's grip, a kingdom that financed the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, now stand as one of the greatest threats to the Jewish people in the final days? And what is the true purpose behind Persia's role in the Bible's apocalyptic prophecy? In this video, we will unravel the mysteries hidden within the prophecies of Persia's rise, its fall, and its ultimate redemption. You will discover how Iran's ancient history aligns with divine plans foretold long before it ever became a modern-day power. What did God intend for this ancient empire, and why is it so central to the apocalyptic prophecies, especially in the prophecies of Ezekiel, Daniel, and Isaiah? Stay with us, because in the next few minutes, you will gain a deeper understanding of Persia's divine destiny, its pivotal role in the history of salvation, and the shocking truth that has been hidden in plain sight for centuries. Do you believe that Iran is fulfilling its biblical role today? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe to dive deeper into these biblical mysteries. Together, let's seek the truth that has been written for us from the beginning of time. The story of Persia, now known as Iran, is not just a tale from the past, but a divine blueprint that stretches across millennia. From the ancient scriptures of the Bible, we see Persia as a nation that has been intricately woven into the fabric of God's plan for salvation and judgment. But as we dive deeper into the history of this mighty empire, we begin to uncover a truth that few have truly grasped. The story of Persia is far from over. In fact, its ultimate role in the fulfillment of prophecy is unfolding right before our eyes. When we look at Persia's origins, we find ourselves back at the beginning of the world, after the Great Flood. God, in his infinite wisdom, chose 3 sons of Noah to be the patriarchs of the nations, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. It is from Shem's line that we find Elam, the father of the Elamites, a people who would eventually inhabit the land that became Persia. To the north, we have Magi, the ancestor of the Medes, a people who would later form an alliance with the Elamites to create one of the largest empires in the ancient world. Together, these two peoples, Elam and Magi, would become the foundation of Persia. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. The Bible doesn't just record the history of Persia, it prophesies its future. The prophet Isaiah, centuries before Persia even existed as an empire, revealed a shocking truth. God would raise up the people of Elam and Magi as instruments of his judgment, first against the wicked kingdom of Babylon. And not only that, God declared that a pagan king named Cyrus, would be anointed by God to fulfill his divine purpose. Imagine that. A pagan king, not a follower of the one true God, but chosen nonetheless to fulfill God's will for the salvation of Israel. Isaiah even called him by name over 150 years before Cyrus was born. This prophecy was not just an idle prediction, it was a divine plan that would change the course of history. When the prophecy came to pass, it wasn't just a political shift, it was a spiritual awakening. King Cyrus, with divine precision, conquered Babylon and freed the Israelites from their 70 years of captivity. But the story doesn't end there. Cyrus, in an extraordinary act of generosity, not only allowed the Israelites to return to their land, but also funded the rebuilding of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. This was a monumental act of restoration, a divine intervention that demonstrated God's faithfulness to his people, even through a foreign king. But the lesson we must learn from this is not just about Cyrus's victory or the rebuilding of a temple. It's about the incredible ways in which God works through the most unlikely of instruments. Iran, once Persia, has a long history of being both a source of judgment and a means of restoration. As the scriptures say, God's ways are higher than our ways, and his plans are beyond our understanding. Persia, a nation that once destroyed Jerusalem, would later be the very instrument used to rebuild it. This divine paradox continues to resonate today. Iran, once the mighty Persian Empire, has become a central figure in global geopolitics, a nation at odds with Israel and the Western world. Yet, in the midst of the political turmoil, there remains a divine promise, one that stretches back thousands of years, hidden within the ancient prophecies of the Bible. The God who used Cyrus to restore Israel is the same God who has an ultimate plan for Iran, a plan that will be revealed in the final days. To understand this better, we must turn to the prophecies of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, we see a vision of four great beasts, representing the four major empires that would rise and fall in history. The second beast, a bear, represents the Medo-Persian Empire, a kingdom that would be raised up to conquer Babylon. But it was not just the kingdom of the Medes, it was Persia, a stronger power that would dominate. The Persian Empire, under King Cyrus, became the instrument of God's justice and mercy. This prophecy was fulfilled with mathematical precision, showing that Persia's rise was part of God's greater plan for the world. Now, as we look to the future, we find that Iran's role is not yet finished. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, we are given a chilling prophecy of the final days, a time when a coalition of nations will rise up against Israel in a great war. Among these nations is Persia. The prophecy speaks of a vast military alliance, led by Gog from the land of Magog, with Persia as a key member. In these dark days, Persia will align itself with nations that seek to destroy Israel, fulfilling the prophecy of the end times. But here's the twist. While the Bible speaks of judgment for those who come against Israel, it also offers a glimpse of redemption. In the book of Jeremiah, there is a prophecy about Elam, the heart of Persia, that promises a future restoration. Even after Persia is judged in the final war, there is hope for the people of Iran. God promises that in the latter days he will restore the fortunes of Elam. This is a powerful reminder that God's plan is not just about judgment, it's also about redemption. Even in the darkest moments, there is a divine promise of hope. So, what does this mean for us today? It means that the story of Persia, of Iran, is not just a tale of ancient history. It is a story that is still unfolding. The nation that once played a role in restoring Israel is now part of a divine narrative that is still being written. And as we watch the events of the world unfold, we must remember that God's hand is at work, shaping the destiny of nations in ways that we cannot always see. For those of us who believe, this is a call to faith. It's a call to trust in the promises of God, even when we don't understand the full picture. Just as Persia was once an instrument of restoration for Israel, so too can Iran play a role in God's ultimate plan of redemption. This is not just about geopolitics. It's about God's sovereignty and his ability to use even the most unlikely nations to fulfill his divine purpose. And so, as we look to the future, we must ask ourselves, what role will Iran play in the coming days? Will it be a nation that turns toward God and embraces his plan of redemption? Or will it continue on a path of defiance, leading to its ultimate judgment? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, Iran's story is far from over, and its place in biblical prophecy is not yet fully realized. As we ponder these things, let us be reminded that God's plan for Persia is a testament to his faithfulness. He is the God who raises up kings and brings them low. He is the God who uses the most unlikely people and nations to accomplish his will. And in the end, his plan will stand, and every knee will bow before him. Let us hold fast to this truth, knowing that in the end, God's justice and mercy will prevail, and his promises will be fulfilled. Just as Persia was once used for restoration, so too can Iran, and so too can we in our own lives be instruments of his divine purpose. As we journey deeper into the history of Persia, we come to a moment of profound reflection. The Persian Empire, despite being the very nation that was once chosen by God to deliver his people, also found itself part of a divine paradox. The same empire that was raised up as an instrument of God's justice against the prideful Babylonian Empire would eventually find itself in opposition to God's plan once more. But God's sovereignty is never in question, even when nations rise and fall. Persia's transformation from a nation of salvation to one that would become a part of the final apocalyptic judgments serves as a testament to the dynamic nature of God's plan for the nations. As Persia became the mighty empire it was prophesied to be, it began to shape history not only through its conquests, but also through its policies, governance, and religious influence. Under the reign of Cyrus, Persia's first great king, the nation emerged not only as a political powerhouse, but as a symbol of divine restoration. It was Cyrus who brought the Israelites back to their homeland and funded the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. A pagan king, one who did not worship the God of Israel, was called by God to fulfill a divine purpose that none could foresee. This remarkable act reveals that even those who seem far removed from God's plan can become instruments of his will. But the true story of Persia's divine role is not just about Cyrus. It is about the entire empire, an empire that spanned vast lands and encompassed countless peoples. Persia's policies were based on tolerance, and it allowed people to worship their own gods. This open-handed approach played a significant role in Persia's ability to rise to power. It was a kingdom unlike any other in the ancient world, where the strength of its military was matched only by the wisdom of its leaders. The legacy of Persia, however, is a complex one, woven into the divine narrative of judgment and mercy. It serves as a reminder that God works through the nations to bring about his ultimate purposes, even when those nations are not aware of the greater plan. As we look to the prophecies of Daniel, we see that Persia was destined to play an even more significant role in the unfolding drama of world history. In Daniel's famous vision of the statue, where the different metals represent the great empires of the world, we see the Persian Empire represented by the silver arms. The prophecy speaks of a kingdom that will defeat Babylon, the head of gold, and will be succeeded by the kingdom of bronze, symbolizing Greece. What's fascinating here is the way Daniel's prophecy unfolds with exacting precision. The Medo-Persian Empire, led by Cyrus, would conquer Babylon and bring forth the downfall of the world's most powerful empire at the time. However, this shift in power would not just affect the geopolitical landscape, it would shift the spiritual trajectory of the world. The fall of Babylon, which seemed like a victory for the Persians, also marked the beginning of a new era of divine judgment and mercy. The Persian Empire was anointed by God to bring judgment upon Babylon, but it was also chosen to restore Israel. This dual role is what makes Persia's story so compelling. It speaks to the complex nature of God's plans, where judgment and redemption often exist side by side. As the Persian Empire continued to expand, we see another pivotal moment in the story of Persia's involvement in biblical prophecy. The visions of Daniel, particularly the vision of the four beasts, reveal the rise and fall of empires that would influence the world for centuries to come. The second beast, a bear, represents the Medo-Persian Empire, which would rise from the east to devour the world, conquering nations and bringing about God's judgment upon those who stood in opposition. The Medo-Persian Empire's role in world history was, in many ways set in motion by God's sovereign hand. Yet, just as Persia was used as an instrument of judgment, it also played a role in God's redemptive plan for Israel. In the book of Esther, we find Persia's role in the restoration of God's people in a more personal and intimate setting. The story of Queen Esther is a beautiful narrative of courage, faith, and divine intervention. Esther, a Jewish woman living in exile in the Persian Empire, became the queen of King Xerxes, and it was through her bravery that the Jewish people were spared from annihilation. This story is not just about a political victory or the preservation of a people. It's a story of God's hand at work in the lives of individuals. In the midst of a vast empire, God used one woman's courage to change the course of history. The Persian Empire, once again, becomes the backdrop for God's redemptive work. This story also highlights the importance of God's timing and how, even in the midst of seemingly impossible circumstances, He is always in control. The story of Esther is a reminder that God's plans are often fulfilled through unexpected means. The Persian Empire, which had once been the enemy of God's people, became the very empire that protected and preserved them. This reversal of fortunes demonstrates the incredible power of God's sovereignty and the ways in which He uses even the most unlikely circumstances to bring about His purposes. As we move into the New Testament, we see Persia's legacy continuing to influence the story of redemption. The Magi, those wise men from the East, are often thought to be from the region that was once Persia. Their journey to find the newborn king is not just a story about three kings following a star. It is a story of fulfillment and revelation. The Magi, likely influenced by the prophecies of Daniel, were aware of the coming of the Messiah. Their journey to Bethlehem is not just about paying homage to a king. It is about recognizing that the true king had come, fulfilling the promises made to Israel. This moment in history is a testament to how God's plan spans across centuries, linking the ancient Persian Empire to the birth of the Savior. The gifts they brought, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, symbolized the royalty, divinity, and sacrifice of Jesus. In this act, the Persian Empire, represented by the Magi, acknowledges the Messiah, the fulfillment of God's promise to the nations. The story of Persia's involvement in the birth of Jesus highlights the beautiful and unexpected ways in which God fulfills His promises, even through nations that were once enemies of His people. As we look at Iran today, we see a nation that is still deeply tied to its ancient roots. Iran, once Persia, stands at the crossroads of prophecy, a nation that was once an instrument of God's mercy and now a key player in the final judgment. The role of Iran in the end times, as prophesied in Ezekiel 38, is a stark reminder that nations can be instruments of both judgment and redemption. Iran's current position in the world may seem far removed from the divine plans that shaped it in the past, but its connection to the fulfillment of prophecy remains undeniable. The lessons we learn from Persia's story are profound. First, we are reminded that God is sovereign over all nations, and He uses even the most unlikely people and nations to fulfill His purposes. Second, we learn that God's plan is often mysterious, and His ways are higher than our ways. Persia, once the enemy of Israel, became its liberator, and now, in the final days, it may once again be called to play a role in God's redemptive plan. Lastly, we are reminded that God's promises are eternal. Even when judgment falls, there is always a path to redemption for those who turn to Him. As we reflect on the history of Persia, we are reminded that God's plan is not bound by time or circumstances. His sovereign hand has shaped nations and empires throughout history, and it will continue to guide the destiny of nations in the days to come. Let us hold fast to the truth that God is in control and His plan will be fulfilled. No matter where we stand, we can take comfort in knowing that God's purposes will stand and His promises will be kept. As we move through the pages of history, Persia's story takes yet another profound turn, one that speaks deeply to the heart of God's redemptive plan. It's no longer just about a kingdom that conquered lands, amassed wealth, or built empires. It becomes a story of divine intervention in the most unexpected ways. Persia's role in the Bible is not only that of a great empire. It's a story of a nation that became a vessel of God's mercy, and later, a symbol of the ultimate struggle at the end of times. The tale of Esther is one of the most powerful examples of how God worked through Persia to protect his people. Queen Esther, a Jewish orphan living in exile in the Persian Empire, finds herself chosen to become the queen of King Xerxes. In a twist of fate, she is placed in the royal palace at a time when her people are in grave danger. Haman, a high-ranking official in the Persian court, devises a plan to exterminate all the Jews in the empire. But God, in his sovereignty, had already set the stage for Esther to rise to the occasion. Esther, despite the risk of death, bravely steps forward, using her position and her influence to save her people. She pleads with King Xerxes, exposing Haman's evil plot, and through her courage, the Jews are spared. This story is not just about Esther's bravery, it's about God's providence, how he can place people in seemingly impossible situations to fulfill his divine purpose. God's hand was on Esther, guiding her every step, even when she didn't fully understand the magnitude of her role. This is where the story of Persia takes a significant turn. What was once a nation that carried out God's judgment on Babylon now becomes a refuge for God's people. Persia, through the courage of a Jewish woman, becomes the instrument of God's deliverance. It is a reminder that God's plans are not always linear. He often works in ways we cannot see, using individuals and nations in ways we cannot comprehend. In Esther's story, we see that God's redemption can come from the most unlikely places, and even in the midst of a foreign empire, God's faithfulness remains unshaken. As we reflect on this, we must ask ourselves, how many times has God placed us in positions of influence, perhaps not understanding the full scope of the situation? Just like Esther, we might find ourselves in circumstances that seem beyond our control, but we can trust that God is at work behind the scenes. His purpose for us is often greater than we realize, and just as Persia became the instrument of God's deliverance, we too can be used by God in ways we never imagined. From the grand stage of Persia's influence on Israel's salvation, we now turn to a more intimate chapter in God's plan, the coming of the Messiah. The story of the Magi, or the wise men, who traveled from the east to find the newborn king, brings us back to Persia. The journey of these men was not just a simple visit to honor a child. Their pilgrimage was a fulfillment of prophecy, and their gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, were deeply symbolic of the Christ they came to worship. The Magi, who came from what was once the heart of the Persian Empire, were likely familiar with the prophecies of Daniel. Daniel, who had been a prominent figure in the Babylonian and Persian courts, had made known the timeline for the coming of the Messiah. The wise men were scholars, astrologers, and priests, and they understood the signs in the heavens. The star that led them to Bethlehem was not just a random celestial event, it was the fulfillment of ancient prophecies. In their journey, the Magi embodied the truth that God's message is for all nations, even for those who were once enemies of Israel. What's particularly striking is how the story of the Magi ties Persia to the very birth of Jesus. Persia, a nation that once held Israel captive, now becomes the first foreign nation to honor and worship the Messiah. The irony of this is not lost in the narrative. While Persia had once been an oppressor, it now stands as a witness to the fulfillment of God's promise. This moment is a testament to the truth that God's redemptive work spans across nations and centuries, fulfilling prophecies in ways that we could never predict. For us, this moment calls for deep reflection. The Magi's journey is a reminder that no matter where we are, God's plan will be fulfilled. Even when we seem far from his promise, he is already at work, orchestrating events, guiding us toward his purpose. The Magi from the east were the first to recognize Jesus as king. But will we, from where we are, also recognize his rule over our lives? Their journey teaches us the importance of seeking the truth, of following the signs God places in our path, and of recognizing that his kingdom is for all people, not just one group or nation. Now, as we fast forward to the final days, Persia's role once again emerges, but this time on the global stage. Ezekiel's prophecy in chapters 38 and 39 speaks of a time when a great alliance of nations will rise up against Israel in the final battle. Among these nations is Persia, or modern-day Iran. This prophecy is both ominous and significant, as it marks the final act in the drama of the nations. Persia, which once played a role in the salvation of Israel, will now be part of the last great conflict in human history. However, this is not the end of the story for Iran. Just as God used Persia as an instrument of mercy in the past, he has also prophesied a future restoration for the nation. In the book of Jeremiah, God declares that he will restore the fortunes of Elam, the ancient land that is now part of modern-day Iran. Despite the judgment that will fall upon those who align themselves against Israel, there is a glimmer of hope, a promise of redemption, even for those who have stood in opposition to God's people. This is the paradox of God's plan. Judgment and mercy often coexist in his divine purpose. As we look at Iran today, it is clear that the nation plays a central role in the unfolding of prophecy. While its current political stance may seem far removed from the story of Cyrus or Esther, the truth remains that Iran is intricately connected to God's ultimate plan. The nation that once helped Israel rebuild the temple now finds itself aligned against God's people. Yet even in the midst of judgment, there is hope. God's promise to restore Iran speaks to the larger theme of redemption in the Bible. No one is beyond his reach, and no nation is beyond his restoration. This brings us back to the heart of Persia's story, a story that spans from redemption to judgment and back again. From Cyrus to Esther, from the Magi to the final days, Persia is a nation that has been shaped by God's sovereign hand. And as we watch the world unfold, we can trust that God is still at work, fulfilling his promises to all nations, including Iran. The story of Persia teaches us that God's redemption is for all people, and that his plan will be fulfilled, no matter how impossible it may seem. As we reflect on Persia's journey, we are reminded of God's unfathomable grace. His ability to redeem and restore even the most unlikely nations is a testament to his power and love. And as we stand in the midst of a world full of uncertainty, let us take comfort in the truth that God is sovereign. His plan will come to pass, and he will fulfill his promises, no matter what the world looks like today. Just as Persia played a pivotal role in the salvation of Israel, so too will nations today and in the future find their place in his divine purpose. Let us trust in God's ultimate plan and remain hopeful that his mercy will prevail in the end. As we come to the end of this journey through the history of Persia, there is a truth that resonates deeply in our hearts. The story of Iran, once Persia, is a testament to the mysterious, redemptive power of God's plan. From its rise as an empire chosen to restore Israel to its role in the final prophecy, Iran's journey reflects a larger narrative, one of redemption, judgment, and hope. It is a reminder that God's ways are higher than our ways, and that no nation, no matter how powerful or broken, is beyond the reach of his love and his sovereign purpose. In a world where we often feel like mere spectators to the unfolding of history, it is comforting to remember that God is actively at work, weaving together the tapestry of the nations according to his divine will. Persia, an empire that played a pivotal role in bringing the Israelites back to their land and helping rebuild the temple, now finds itself caught in the midst of prophecy once again. This ancient empire, with all its glory, struggles, and transitions, is intricately tied to the fate of nations. Its story is a living reminder that God has a purpose for every nation, and that purpose is not always immediate or clear, but it is always certain. The prophecy of Persia's future, from the rise of Cyrus to its eventual judgment in the end times, speaks to the complexity of God's plan. And yet, even in the midst of judgment, there is a promise of restoration. Just as God used Persia as an instrument of deliverance in the past, He will, in the future, bring about a renewal, a chance for redemption. This is the essence of the biblical story, God's relentless pursuit of His people and His ability to turn even the most unlikely circumstances into instruments of salvation. We cannot help but reflect on the parallels between Persia's story and our own. How many times have we found ourselves in situations where we felt lost, confused, or far from God's will? How many times have we wondered if redemption was even possible for us or for the world around us? And yet, just as God brought Israel back through the hands of a foreign king, He can bring restoration to us, to our families, to our nations. His hand is never too short to save, and His timing is always perfect. As we watch the world unfold, it is crucial to remember that God's plan for the nations is still in motion. Iran's role in the future may seem uncertain, but one thing remains clear. God will fulfill His promises, and His word will not return void. Whether it's a nation, a people, or an individual, God is always working behind the scenes, drawing us closer to His ultimate purpose of redemption. If you have felt the weight of this message, if it has stirred something in your heart, or if you found comfort in knowing that God's sovereign hand is at work, I invite you to support this channel with a small gesture of encouragement. Every moment you spend watching, sharing, and engaging with these videos helps spread the light of God's word to others who may be searching for hope in dark times. If this video has blessed you, if it has helped you find a glimpse of truth or peace, I would be so grateful if you could show your support by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with others. Just as God has used this platform to reach your heart, it is my prayer that it continues to touch others. Every like, every comment, and every share makes a difference. It allows this message of redemption and hope to reach further, to touch more souls, and to inspire a deeper understanding of God's will for our lives. Your support, no matter how small, is a gift that I hold dearly, and it fuels my commitment to continue creating content that brings light into the darkness. If this video has brought value to your soul, or if you've found a bit of peace in the midst of your struggles, I humbly ask for your continued support. Every contribution, whether through a comment, a like, or simply sharing this message with someone who may need it, is a powerful way to be a part of something larger than ourselves. The truth of God's word has the power to transform, and with your help, we can continue to spread that truth to others who are in desperate need of it. As we reflect on the unfolding story of Persia and its ultimate role in the divine plan, remember that we too are part of a much larger story. Just as nations rise and fall according to God's will, so too does our journey have purpose. Even when we feel lost or unsure of our place, we can take comfort in knowing that God's plan is still in motion, and He is always working on our behalf. Through His grace, He will restore what was broken, redeem what was lost, and bring light to the darkest corners of our world. Thank you for being part of this journey. Your presence here, your engagement with this message, and your support mean more than words can express. Together, we are creating a community where God's word can flourish and where His love can be shared freely. Thank you from the depths of my heart for being a part of this. May God continue to bless you and guide you in His perfect plan.